Okay, good evening. Today is March 28th, 2019. This is the board meeting of the Hyde Park Central School District. May I have a motion to enter executive session?
So moved.
Well, I got that. All right. To discuss confidential matters pertaining to unit negotiations and personnel matters. Now we can.
Now I'll move.
All right, I'll second way over here.
Any discussion on that? All in favor? Opposed? We are now in executive session.
All right, that's it, I'm done for the night.
What happens?
Done for the night.
I guess you're not going to
You
exec.
can't jump the gun.
Right.
You got,
As long as there's a
Thank you,
majority.
everyone.
Oh, I gotta show you something.
Thanks.
All I've got is module D left to go. There are 3 lessons in it.
Okay, let's start. So, welcome to the Hyde Park Board of Education meeting on March 28th, 2019. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, there's one agenda modification, budget transfer item 10.6 has been added to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to, do we have to first amend the agenda and then we,
yes.
So I move to amend the agenda.
Second.
is there any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. So, upcoming events. On Friday, March 28th and March 30th is the Haviland Middle School's spring play called Willy Wonka Jr. That sounds fun. On Saturday, April 6th, Duchess Bosey's Spring Expo, Community Open House, that is from 11 to 2. And on Thursday, April 11th, it will be the next Board of Education meeting. I assume that's in the district office, right? Okay, on to Pride. Patrick?
So I don't have too much this time, but so a few weeks ago was the musical Barnum, and I saw a lot of you guys there. It was really good. I think we can all agree. It was a really great performance put on by the students and my peers. I know I was shocked by like a lot of the, I don't know, I just didn't expect like it to be that good. You know, it was really, really good. So and then so Friday, March 5th at 6 p.m. is Mr. President. It's a very anticipated event each year.
April 5th?
Yeah, that's what I meant, April 5th. So make sure you come see that. I'll be in it so you can watch me.
Give us a little sample.
So, and then yesterday, 3 student athletes signed their national letters of intent. Owen Pacquiana, he signed to SUNY New Paltz to play baseball. Tyler Norman signed to Hartwick, he's playing football. And Caitlin Rose signed to SUNY Delhi, and she's playing softball. So that was a nice ceremony for them. The early childhood class at Duchess Bosey's, they're hosting a children's book drive. So they're accepting children's books for infants to 8-year-olds, books that are in good condition. The donation boxes are in the main office. And just a little sports update, the spring season has started, so a few teams have had a few scrimmages. But the girls lacrosse, they won their home opener against Saugerties 19-8, so that was a good win. And that's it for Pride.
Anybody else have Pride? I will say I went to the string concert, the all-district string concert, held in the gym, but I thought it was quite amazing to see so many of our children that are playing string instruments. So it was a great time. The elementary rocked it, I will say that.
They did. They were good.
At that concert, Melinda announced, it just came in, that for the third year in a row, Hyde Park Central School District has been named the Best Community for Music Education Award. We're not the only ones who get it, but it's a pretty substantial application, and the expectations for getting it are pretty high, so we are very pleased to announce that for the third year in a row, we have a Best Community for Music Education. Tomorrow, speaking of strings, this is the week of strings. Our elementary strings students are traveling to Albany, New York for Music in Our Schools Month, and they will be playing at the Empire State Plaza. Our time slot is 11:30 to 12:15. We're frequently joined by our own legislators. I don't know who may show up, but it's really an honor to be selected to go play in Albany at the Capitol. The FDR clothing drive, I'm looking over here because I forgot to write down how many tons of clothing. Okay, well, the clothing drive at FDR was this past Saturday, and the pictures were amazing, and they gathered a tremendous amount of clothing to be donated. 2 trucks worth of clothing. 2 trucks worth of clothing. So thank you to the people who manage that drive. I know Sue Cerulli and many, many, many others spearhead that. Elna, one of them as well. I don't want to leave anybody out, but just a lot of people involved. We have several students that were accepted into, that applied for and are accepted into the Summer Scholars Program. It's a very rigorous academic program. They do presentations, they select an area of focus to do intense research. So Linda Lamberton, Hannah Lasher, Sean Lee, Alexa Ligori, Skylar Lindley, Nicholas Moffett, Ryan Spear, Matthew Sweet, and Sadiq Spears. So congratulations for them being accepted to the Summer Scholars Program. Nice to know we've got a very representative group of students who want to do some pretty sophisticated research over the summer.
Any other pride?
Just to mention, at the string presentation, I don't know how many would have noticed it, probably not too many besides myself, but playing one of the instruments on the dais, or whatever you want to say, with the elementary students was the teacher who started the whole thing, actually. Edie Stratton was the first one that brought the string music to the district, and persisted with it for a number of years. And I sat there, I said, it's amazing to see the difference between the elementary, the middle school, and the high school at today. And I thought back out that first year we saw string instruments being played to this, there's just no comparison at all. It's an amazing thing, and it's interesting to see it. Some of the schools locally are beginning to try and find a way into the music business or music school. They can't afford to have their own music program, and I guess they've consolidated. They've got a group that provides music education to several of the Catholic elementary schools. They'll come in for 2 days and teach instrumental music, and they'll have a concert for the kids and stuff, and I guess they move on to another school. And it's nice to see, because they have a Catholic school presentation of music where they bring all these kids from the different schools together, work for a day like we do, and then present a concert.
Oh, that's great.
It's nice to see. The kids throughout the whole county are really getting this education, and it's amazing to see.
That's great. Yeah.
I'd just like to say something too regarding of course, I have to shout out again about the play. It was wonderful. But what I also just really love about it is that it brings out so much of our alumni. We see a lot of our alumni come back for those performances. And this year, and every year too, but it's really wonderful. We see a lot of our staff come and support it. And it's really a wonderful event.
Any more pride? Okay, superintendent's report?
Yeah, before we get to the formal, I have two informal. A number of years ago, we started to have our reorg meeting later in July at a couple of board members' requests, and those board members are no longer here. There's no hard and fast regulations. The first recommendation from State Ed is that you have the reorg the first Tuesday of the month. We are in process for calendar, but it says you can set it any time for the first 15 days. But I just wanted to know, before we move into the calendar process, does anybody want to weigh in on whether or not we have the reorg the first Tuesday or the second Tuesday? So right now, we have it down for July 2nd, but it's not, 9th, but it's not written in stone. So there's two schools of thought. The former board members, some of them just always traveled that week. Other boards want to have it as soon as possible so that the reorg is done. So I'm bringing it up in public. If you want, you can let Jay know whether it matters or not, or...
Why don't we just, either is fine with me.
Does anybody have a preference?
So it was, the choices are the first Tuesday or the second Tuesday?
Yeah,
July 2nd or 9th?
I wouldn't be able to make the first Tuesday.
Fine.
can we stay with the 9th?
Yeah, the 9th works for me.
That's fine.
9th.
It's just easier to bring it up and ask people their preference. This second is just an announcement. We just got word that the capital project for North Park Elementary School has been approved by State Education Department, so yay. So we should be talking about going out to bid and getting our ducks in a row for, first we have to find out the level of any abatement projects, if necessary, for this summer, and we should have that shortly.
And Elliot's going to get busy.
And then I have the next presentation, right?
Yep. So next up is the substantial equivalency in religious and independent schools.
Okay, so there's a state regulation that's 70 years old, and for the most part, has not been utilized at all in 70 years. There was a matter that came up that had some controversy to it about the quality of some of the independent schools, and so the State Education Department looked at it. They formed a group of people to say, all right, this is the law, we should start following it. I will say that it would have been helpful to see what the status of this situation looked like 70 years ago and what was done to accommodate that. The status is very different 70 years later. So be that as it may, we now have to follow the law, and the State Education Department, this is their PowerPoint, and they have put together a toolkit to assist school districts. So this is the actual law, and the premise here is that it is the responsibility of the home public school district to determine whether or not the private schools in your catchment area are substantially equivalent to a public school education. Not equal, but substantially equivalent. So for Hyde Park, that means we would now have to determine, and I'll get into a little bit more of how that's determined later on, whether or not these schools that I'm going to list right now are substantially equivalent. So that's Abilities First, St. Peter's, Millennial Kingdom Family School, Kinderhouse Montessori School, Anderson School, and Ridge School. So they say that for decades, they've provided guidance on how public school officials were to determine. Well, I'm not doubting that it was on the website. What I do know is that for the 700 school districts in New York State, this law was not being followed for 70 years. So they did take a look at the current law and some amendments that were made, and they developed a toolkit so that we can now go in and evaluate these schools. There was a process that the State Education Department used over 2 years. They consulted with numerous stakeholders in both public and non-public school communities. They used feedback from those meetings to enhance the guidance documents. So basically, it is the superintendent's responsibility to conduct the review and evaluation of all the private schools in the area. I come to the Board of Education with a recommendation of whether or not I've determined, based on the toolkit, I did supply the Board of Education with a copy of the toolkit, whether or not the schools are substantially equivalent, and then you as a Board of Education will vote on whether or not you agree with my finding or not agree with my finding. If you don't agree, then well, let's put it this way. So if I recommend that a certain school is not substantially equivalent, I'll go through a few scenarios, and you agree, you vote that yes, based on the information Greer provided, they're not substantially equivalent. If the private school wants to appeal that, thankfully, the appeal goes to the commissioner.
That's good.
There is also going to be a BOCES COSER that they'll provide a service for a fee. We don't know what the fee is yet, so that if either I determined or we determined that it was not time well spent for the superintendent to go and conduct these reviews and use this toolkit and make a recommendation, you could purchase this service from BOCES, and they would go in and do the review. I would still then review the information because it is the superintendent's signature that goes on the recommendation, and it still is the Board of Education who votes on this. Again, substantial equivalency means that the program is comparable in content and educational experience, but may differ in method of delivery. I asked the commissioner very specifically if in reviewing the school districts with the toolkit, and the toolkit has 41 areas that you need to examine for each of the schools, whether or not in the areas of curriculum were we evaluating whether or not they had a curriculum or they were delivering the curriculum that they had on the books. It's a pretty big difference.
Right.
And the answer was whether or not they had the curriculum. Because to conduct a review in every single curricular area of whether or not they were following it could take months, to do this review. If, as I said, let's just say whether it's myself or BOCES that utilizes the toolkit and goes in to do the evaluation of the independent or private school, I determine that they're not substantially equivalent. The next step for the superintendent of the public school district is to sit down and collaboratively write an improvement plan with a timeline for the independent and private school. So I think I listed 6 schools for our district. There are places in Rockland that have 40 or 50 private or independent schools.
Is it schools within our district, or
Yeah.
I thought it said kids going to other schools?
It's schools that are private or independent schools that are geographically located within our school district. So it's the physical location of the private or independent.
But in that first one, it says children who reside within the boundaries of the school district.
Yeah, and so that's interesting too, because one of the, when I went down for my training, there was the headmaster of a private school, and he said, well, we live geographically within the confines of this public school district, but we only have like one kid from the school district where we, is it still that superintendent that has to come in? And the answer was yes. So I don't know why, I'm not sure which piece you're looking at, but it is, they say children, but it's geographical. And we were all given a list of the schools that we're responsible for. And then we were told, if you know of any others that aren't on the list, you need to let us know. So I did need to let them know about one other independent school that's within our geographic area that wasn't on the list because they haven't applied for a BEDS number. That's the basic educational data system number. So we're trying to, just so you know, if you're reading your NYSBA monthly newsletters or any of the various emails, there are a couple of lawsuits. I believe the Archdiocese is fighting pretty heavily. The private schools, some of the private schools are fighting and have lawsuits, and the yeshivas have some lawsuits. So I have my marching orders. It's just someone saying there are lawsuits doesn't mean I don't do this. It's my license, so I have to move forward because the litigation could take years. So the trainings, State Ed provided the trainings. I already went to my training. I got to the training, I think it was last month, and was told I needed to do the review this year, but then learned that the reviews could continue into next year. They have to be done by December 15th, 2021, and then every 5 years thereafter. They listed some core principles. They said that this should be a very collegial approach, and that as the superintendent, I need to now reach out to all of the private independent schools that I listed and let them know that we're responsible, let them know when we will be coming in, give them an opportunity to collect all of the materials that respond to the 41 categories that I have to look at, whether it's myself or if we subcontract to BOCES, and a lot of that will depend on pricing. They mentioned the team approach, and I said, is it mandated that it's a team that evaluate, or is it a recommendation? And they told me it was a very strong recommendation, so that would be Aviva and I if we were to do it, because they feel that, well, for everybody, it's better if it's not just one person, but that we should go in, it should be objective, mindful, sensitive, respectful, and consistent. We certainly don't have an adversarial relationship with any of these entities, nor do we plan to make it adversarial, but there's a lot of high anxiety when you look at the toolkit, and then in a very quick turnaround time, after 70 years of never having to do this, that now someone's going to come in and look at whether or not they're following this and studying. So there's some anxiety out there.
And can they say no? It's a private school. What if they say, no, you're not doing this?
I don't know. I honestly don't think they can say no.
I can say,
Yeah.
that question was asked in one of the
when you're-
groups.
okay.
When I had State Ed people in the room, and the response was, well, it's your responsibility to try to make this collegial.
The commissioner keeps just saying, when we ask these questions, she just keeps saying, well, it's the law. And so, they could choose to do their end and break the law, and,
So they're okay that the two major senior administrators are out of district for however many days this takes?
Yeah.
I mean, that's counterproductive in itself.
If you looked at the review toolkit, if you were to do this properly, if I were to properly make an assessment of a school district, it would take some time. So there's mixed feelings about, whether, and I'll hearken back to what I mentioned earlier, 70 years ago, the landscape on private and independent schools was very different. Now, you can put together an independent or private school, and they were permitted to exist by the state education department without ever collecting any of these reviews. So I'm not allowed to say they broke the law too, but, so yes, it's a matter of time, and then it's a matter of, it's either going to be time or expense.
Right.
But somebody needs to do it, and at the end of the day, whether it's Aviva and I, or we subcontract to BOCES, I still need to put my signature on it, and you still need to vote on it.
So what happens if you say that they're not, what's the term?
Substantially
equivalent, and we agree, and it goes to the commissioner, and the commissioner upholds that? What happens to the school? They have to shut down?
I would think that that's...
They're going to lose
Yeah,
them.
yeah. But I'm not allowed to say right out of the chute that they're not substantially equivalent. If I find that they're not substantially equivalent, I'm then supposed to work with them to write a detailed improvement plan with a timeline. What's not clear is how long they're allowed to be in that improvement plan. That is still an unknown. There's still some logistical details working out. So,
How do we prove to the state that we're at a level that we should be?
well, we're audited every which way to Sunday on several levels. There are some things that technically, I guess, we could not be in compliance with, but almost every area of compliance, there's a report. So we're heavily reporting. As for curriculum, I guess a district could turn a blind eye on whether or not we're teaching the ELA standards. We could put them on the back burner, but that's something that never happens. We're very driven by the standards that are set forth by
But in
SED.
theory, we could be down here, we could be a crappy place, and then we're saying, oh, these schools are equivalent to us down here, but who's checking to make sure that we're at a standard up here?
Yeah.
To make sure they're equivalent up here, right?
Yeah. Well, I know that in looking at the toolkit, if you look at the toolkit, I could sit down and tell you how we know exactly that we're in compliance with all 41 aspects, and for most of them, there's a reporting mechanism. So, some of the interesting things were, it gets, some of the areas are broad, and some of them are very specific. Like, do you teach the Constitution in third grade?
Right.
Do you teach
Pretty amazing.
bike safety or vehicle safety in the fourth grade? So there's some very minute, specific things that we've just been doing for years because they were mandated, so we know they're being done. But a lot of the privates are like, whoa, we didn't even know this was a regulation. It hasn't come up in 70 years, and the regulations aren't the same as 70 years ago anyway. So some of them are behind the eight ball in areas that it's not really their fault either. I feel for them. There's been no checks and balances for 70 years, and now overnight, you need to be in compliance with every one of these. I said to, just take the mental health curriculum. So there's, in the toolkit, I have to verify whether or not they have mental health curriculum. And I'll tell you right now, if a school district doesn't have a mental health curriculum, I feel very uncomfortable signing it off saying that it's okay, you know? So each one of the areas that you're looking at is a law. And so in my training, people were saying, okay, of the 41 areas, how many laws do you need to break before you're not? And it was just like, well, you know, it's just, you know,
A few.
there's no magic number. Well, are any of these more important? Is it more important that they have mental health curriculum versus bike safety? Well, no, it's not that, you know, so.
But you could say it's okay if they don't have a mental, but the guy from Arlington could fail a school, so there's no
Right.
consistency.
Yeah, so it's complicated, and I'm trying to take this objectively and professionally, and just take it one step at a time. But on the one hand, you know, you can go through and do it, and on the other hand, it's a pretty weighty thing to be able to, for me to say whether or not, how many of these boxes, 41 boxes, will it take not to be checked for me to say they're not equivalent? And even if only 5 are not checked off, are they weighty enough for me to say that? So we're going to navigate our way through this because it's the law.
At least you don't have to go to homeschools, right?
Right? Oh, I can't even imagine. Well, the homeschools,
You're being mandated to go ahead regardless of the fact that there are going to be lawsuits about this?
yes,
You're to ignore that and continue ahead?
yes, yes. Let's see what else they say.
He's going to be overseeing Lord's.
There are a couple of non-public schools where the commissioner actually has to determine that, and those are if they are a bilingual school and they have extended hours. None of these schools in our area are bilingual, so we do them. This is just a little preview of the toolkit. I gave you the toolkit. There's some resources, and coming soon, there'll be some frequently asked questions. I don't know if that's up there yet, and training dates, and we certainly have the training dates. So, my approach as we move through this next year, the first step is we need to reach out to the schools and apprise them that this is a reality and that this will happen. So I plan to send a letter to each of the school districts with what the law is and somewhat of a timeline, and at least give them, you know, I'm not sure all of them even know this exists right now. I certainly know that the parochial schools are all over this. They're on board and well aware and ready, and I actually have somebody in the Archdiocese who wanted to partner with me on some things. He thought I had some good ideas. And some of the independent schools are aware, but the first step would be to reach out in such a way that again, you know, it's not up to me to make adversaries with local entities that, you know, we have either some, with St. Peter's, we have a very ongoing working relationship. Abilities First, we have a very ongoing working relationship, but there are people on this list that, you know, honestly, I have no relationship, but I certainly don't want them to feel that we're coming in there heavy-handed.
And UPKs, that's not in scope, so it starts at what?
Kindergarten.
Even
Yeah.
though, isn't kindergarten optional, or is that?
Yeah, but it includes, that's why the Montessori, because they go up to primary grades. Did you hear?
So I think there may
otherwise?
be confusion about the abilities, because they also have a school-age program for kids with special needs. So it's not the UPK that we're talking about.
Right, yeah. Any other questions with the good news of the day?
And they didn't think this would bring, if you have the power to shut down a private school, they don't think this is going to bring bad behavior?
Yeah.
Like if you're a school district struggling for numbers, and you have a lot of, say we have 30 private schools, well, you're motivated to, or there's some motivation to shut those down and have the kids come here, right?
Well, the very first article I read about this didn't say we had the power to shut them down.
Oh, I thought you just said.
We have a power to say that what happens is we no longer would have to bus to them, is what the one article said. But that's after years of working things out.
Well,
So-
they don't have the timeline for working things out, and if I recommend they're not substantially equivalent, and the board agrees and votes that they're not substantially equivalent, it's within the commissioner's power to shut them down.
Yep.
And that's the intent here, is to shut down the schools that are not substantially equivalent. First, I have to make an effort to improve them with them. And again, the timeline is vague. When they had the training down in, I don't know whether it was Orange or Rockland County, they had to call in the police just for the presentation and the training. There were people picketing. I think people had to be removed from the property. It got pretty serious. It's contentious in some areas of New York State, very contentious.
Just one more question. So are there rules to opening a private school, or could?
That's what I'm thinking, don't they have to meet criteria
Can I just
to
go and open up
and
Mike's
operate?
school tomorrow and?
Well, that is an area I don't know, and I think that would be helpful to know. If they were permitted to run as a school, I don't even have the information or what it looks like. What did the application look like? That's an area that I'm not familiar with.
The one piece I do know is when we were asking them questions, that they never made a visit. So they've approved all of these private schools, and they've never been there.
So they have to approve?
The state has approved all of these schools without visiting,
To be
to be an approved private school in the state of New York.
Okay.
And Greer, you said the process is to get a beds number?
That's one, but we found one school that doesn't have a beds number, but,
They found them anyway.
right. So,
So really, the state checks public schools to be at a certain level, and instead of doing the same checking on private schools, they're saying, that's your problem now.
right. And some of it doesn't make any sense to me. There's a whole page of things there, like, I have to go in and check whether or not they had their fire inspections and, this inspection and that inspection. There's a whole facility section. And they have to, that's something that we were told that they report to the state anyway. And I thought, well, if they're reporting to you and sending in their evidence of fire inspections the same way we do, why do I have to check that as part of my review? You already got that covered. There's some of it that doesn't make sense, but no, you still need to ask for the documentation.
And do you keep the documentation?
It doesn't say what I'm supposed to do with the documentation. I'm just supposed to fill out the
If you
toolkit.
get into that, or like inspections for fire inspection.
Yeah.
And something goes wrong, now are you liable? Because
Well-
you said it was good.
This is why some of the people in the room wanted to make friends with me, because I was asking questions that, I feel that it puts me personally in a very sticky situation, that I'm now going in and looking at 41 areas, and I've got no guidance about how many can fail before I say, and I think it puts a local board of education in a very difficult situation. I think it puts a lot of onus on a local superintendent to go in and review another whole school district, and I think the time factor is significant. So,
Well, it sounds to me like the state doesn't want to be held responsible for giving licenses to all of these schools without following through, and they're passing the buck, and they don't want to staff their own department to do it. I mean,
Does the state currently review these licenses that they give them on a periodic basis, or is that just the
Yeah.
magic number came up every 5 years to
Yeah.
cover another oversight?
I don't know. There was a lot of politics going on about the quality of some of the schools that have been allowed to exist, to be quite frank. There are some school districts that have 40 independent schools, and people were saying, these kids are getting high school diplomas, but I don't know what all the politics are behind it. I would have thought that the rational way to look at this would be to say, if nobody's been following the law, including the state education department, I would have advocated to hit the pause button and say, 70 years later, we need to look at the impact. The commissioner has said that they put a committee together and they looked at it for 2 years and they developed a toolkit so that it would make it easy to do.
And the wording is clearly opposite of what, I don't know if that's not the legal wording, but it clearly states that it's children residing in your boundaries, right? So that means you're responsible for the kids in your district. Right, rather than, you could have a school in your district where none of the kids are from your area,
Right.
right?
Well,
But you should be I would agree, you should be responsible to make sure every person, every kid living within the Hyde Park School District is getting a good education, whether it's from us or from somebody else. That makes sense.
Well, I will specifically ask that question because it does raise an interesting point. So, that might be something they missed. Maybe they worded it that way because they just assumed if the school is within your district, you probably have a couple of kids going there, and that way all of the schools are covered because someone's going to evaluate. But I'll tell you, there is one school on our list where we have 0 children, and the children are coming from other school districts. So I think that's a legitimate question for me to pose back. If you're wording, was that a translation of the regulation, or is that the quote of the regulation? If there are no children attending the school, do I have to?
Right. Are you worried about the schools or the children? That's the real question.
Yeah.
As a board and superintendent, what's our scope?
Right.
School or the board, or
Yeah.
the child?
I think I know the answer, but I think it's worth asking because.
It is, because if it really is the child,
Yeah.
that 6 may turn into 15 for you, because you got Lords, you got, all these other schools, wherever they go, you would have to then go there, right?
Right. I think that's why they were thinking, as long as they said in your geographic area, somebody would be responsible for evaluating the school.
Yeah, otherwise you could have, Lord, you'd have 20 people trying
Yeah.
to evaluate the same
Right.
school.
Yeah.
Right.
Imagine about boarding schools.
Yeah.
Some affluent areas, you got 3 or 4 boarding schools. I remember we went for a soccer match, and we passed 3 boarding schools in a span of maybe 5 miles.
Yeah.
And the probability possibly could be that none of the kids in any of those schools were from that geographic location.
On the interesting, there's some really pretty elite, expensive private schools that go through very rigorous review processes. Middle states, tri-states, they are evaluated, and they said, if we already have records of being evaluated by a third party, why can't you accept that? And the commissioner's response was that there are several organizations that conduct school evaluations, and the state education department is not in the business of evaluating outside organizations' templates for school evaluations. So there are some private schools that are very insulted.
That sounds like New York State isn't in the business of evaluating their own schools that they're licensing either, so.
Well, in effect, wouldn't it have put those other entities that are doing the evaluation out of business? Because if the state's not going to,
Right.
they're going to be done locally now, so
Yeah.
why do they need 2?
The most interesting thing was there is a branch of the State Education Department, that is the New York State Association for Independent Schools, that actually has some sort of a consortium for reviewing schools, and they don't recognize even that one. So I'm going to just take some deep breaths. I'll keep you posted. You'll see a lot of it in all of your journals and articles, and we'll take it one step at a time.
Do you feel a need for us to go and purge any public pictures of Greer Rychek at this point to protect her safety?
No, I think I'm okay so far, yeah. I think it's, if you did it the way it's supposed to be done, in a meaningful way, it could be extremely time-consuming, and it certainly is weighty to have to make that recommendation. You know, I don't think it's a flip thing. I don't think you just like, oh, well, there's no magic number for how many boxes. Well, that's the answer that I'm given. So, but we'll take it one step at a time and keep you posted. And
Okay, thanks, Greer. So next up, we have the mid-year update of facilities and operations by Eldon Sheldia.
Good evening, everybody. Oh, so you hear me now? So this is our mid-year update for the facilities department. So facilities by the numbers. We have 9 total buildings totaling 626,176 total square footage. That's 22 evening custodians, roughly 28,500 square feet per nighttime custodian. We have 9 daytime custodial workers, 7 maintenance workers, which that totals to 89,500 square feet per maintenance worker. We have 2 painters, 1 heating and ventilation mechanic, 1 courier custodian. We also have 164 developed acres for 4.5 groundskeepers, which works out to 36.4 acres per groundskeeper. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask at any time. So as we move on, some recently completed projects in the district. Last school year, just before the end of school year, we completed the restroom, the girls' restroom at FDR next to the auditorium. This past fall, we did the playground at Violet Avenue. I don't know if anybody's seen it, it's pretty nice. We also dug out over last summer all of the old pea stone at North Park playgrounds and put in new mulch. Last winter / early spring, we completed the FDR sound booth. We substantially completed the $1.1 million HVAC controls upgrade in July of 2018. The Maintenance Direct School Dude, I don't know if anybody uses it here. You guys all have access to it now, so you can put work orders in at any time.
All right.
So, we did get a lot.
You make house calls?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just,
I don't think you want me to have access to that.
Anybody with a Hyde Park Central School District email address can gain access to it now. And then we also continue to work with the technology department. So most recently, we've continued to install TVs. Some of the more notable ones are the FDR cafeterias. We also installed about 10 rolling carts most recently for the gymnasiums and the pods, because the metal walls can't really accept the TVs. And we continue to work with them on the AV equipment in the auditorium. So most recently, at the last board meeting, you saw the newest screen at Violet Avenue. We've also done FDR in North Park Elementary. So, the highly anticipated capital projects. We have the North Park Elementary School well that's on schedule for this summer. Tank should be arriving in the next couple months, right before school ends. The Haven Middle School bathroom, the girls' bathroom between the gym and the cafeteria, that's gone to SED. It's just waiting for review. and we anticipate on doing that late summer, early fall. The North Park heating and ventilation, which we all know just got approved. And the FDR pods and HMS science labs. So that is currently with SED, but it will probably be a while before we get approval on that. And construction scheduled for either late spring, early summer 2020 through the fall of 2021. So a few projects that we're working on and coming up are the FDR concession stand. I'm sure everybody's been to it. It's going to be officially found, hopefully in the near future. It's with SED. The Violet Avenue bullet aid that Greer mentioned a couple weeks ago, we're working on pricing out repaving the whole playground area, the 2 staircases that lead to it, and we're going to get some new stencils, which hopefully actually the maintenance department will install. The custodial chemical and process transition. So we switched chemical vendors last year, and what this has really done, we call it the CAP program, the Cleaning Cost Analysis Program, is it allowed, the company came in and they went through all our 626,000 square feet, counted every toilet, every sink, every mirror, every square foot in this building. And we were able to identify exactly how long everything should take, so we evenly distribute the labor and make sure everybody's got a fair share, so there's no questions that this guy's doing more, this guy's not doing enough, so on and so forth. Also at the transportation facility, we're upgrading some oil tanks for them and the drainage in the building, and then obviously more technology stuff. Mr. Wirt. So actually over spring break, we're going to do the AV in the Haviland Auditorium. And the server rack, actually that service is all Haviland Middle School. And then...
Can I ask a question about the concession stand?
Yeah.
You're not putting food-making equipment in there, or are you?
We're going to find the building first, and then work towards that.
Okay, because I just want to know if we needed the health certificate and all the other stuff that goes with that.
Yeah.
That's coming? That's the plan?
That's the future plan. First they're trying to locate the building on our property, and then we'll be able to do that. Currently, they cook outside.
Yeah. Yes.
And then the building condition survey, it could be coming as early as 2020, but there's legislation out there where they're trying to stagger it throughout the state. So we'll see where that lands in the next couple of weeks, actually. Some department news. We'll talk about school do it a little bit. So most recently, Rich Foster, custodial supervisor for the district's been working on starting an inventory system. We're going to start with all custodial products, then work towards the other items that the department buys. Then we're going to, next is maintenance direct, that's our portion of school doing. Annually, we have about 1,400 preventative maintenance work orders. So that's like checking your emergency lights, eye wash stations, lights in the classrooms. And then there's 1,600 work orders for general inquiries where it's like the outlet over here doesn't work. Can somebody come look at it? So a couple cool statistics since we opened it up. In 2017, actually in 2018, when we opened it up to the general public or anybody within the district, we actually had about 100 more work orders for the first 2 months of the year than we did the year before. So it means it's actually being used. Now, some of them did get forwarded to Rick, because when you pull down the menu, we're the first one on there. So we got a lot of like technology things, but it's good that people are actually using the system. So what this entails is, you know, a lot of times somebody might be in the building and they talk to a custodian and say, hey, I got this help, but he might be on his way to go do something. He or she might be going to do something, and they completely forget about it, and then that person feels forgotten. Now, this is able for us it's the reminder that, oh yeah, the light is out in my room, or whatever the case may be. Also, starting in December, we started the North Park Indoor Air Quality and Moisture Management Plan. What this is we go into each classroom, look from the floor to the ceiling, see if there's any way that water could be getting in that building or moisture buildup. We also look at the roofs, we look at the heating system, we look at the windows, and anything that needs addressing, we address as soon as possible. Also, in December, I became New York State Department of Labor Certified Mold Assessor, and in February, I got my asbestos inspector license as well. So, thank you to everybody. This past year, we actually had about 6 new employees to the department, which actually totals to be about 13.5%. And if anybody's got any questions?
I have a question. What about the men's bathroom in the FDR auditorium? What's going on there?
Linda's going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's coming up. It will be part of one of the next $100,000 outlay projects.
Okay, I just wasn't sure, I didn't know, that was all pre-me, so I wasn't really sure how it was laying out. And I never go in there, so I didn't know if it was done. Okay.
We were trying to do, but we didn't have enough money last time.
Okay, thank you, I just wanted to know the status. Great.
Couple questions. You say 13.5%. That's not, you haven't increased have you increased your staff 13.5?
No.
Or these are just new hires to replacing?
New hires from within or from the outside. You know, people retire, people move on.
But the number of positions hasn't changed. It's just a matter of new people in those positions.
New people. The only new position, but this was before this last update, was we added a full-time cleaner from a part-time cleaner that was a part-time person at Haviland Middle School to, he cleans part of Haviland and then goes to the transportation facility.
With the CAP program, has that shown, did you adjust any of your work assignments based on the results of the CAP? Is it CAP?
Yeah, CAP, here we go back to it, you could,
Yeah.
we call it CAP instead of saying it all out, but actually what it did, it impacted the elementary schools the most. And historically, the morning guy would come in, turn the lights on, make sure the boiler was on, and maybe wipe down the windows in the front lobby. Now he or she has a small portion, which takes a load of work off the night crew, so they could do more tabletop cleaning, dusting, polishing that typically they never got to in the past.
Right.
And it helped balance the high school as well. That was one of the bigger areas.
All right, one last question. With the school dude maintenance director, does that give updates to the originators of work orders? So your teachers, faculty are able to enter a work order request?
Yes, so
when something happens, parts are ordered?
Rick could probably help me a little bit with this one, but I know you put a work order in, you get an email back saying that your request has been entered. If I change the status to work in progress and put a completion date on it, they get an email with that.
Okay.
And then when I complete it, they get a notification saying it's completed.
Okay.
Unless anything's changed. That's
Yeah, it's a nice way of communicating to the people that work is happening, all too often. Otherwise, it just goes into a big box and you never know whether anything's going to get done or where you are in the process. Yeah, good feature.
we just try to make sure that we're realistic with the dates on it when we say it's going to be done by Friday. I want to make sure it's done by Friday when we put it on, so
Yeah.
we like to overshoot a little bit.
Any other questions? Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks, Elliot.
So next up is our budget update from Linda.
Good evening. So tonight we have quite a lot to get to. There's some new items that haven't been presented yet. I do have some backup in case I need it We're going to talk about a potential tech project, and we've added a project for facilities. Okay. So this slide is the summary of our budget to budget and our tax levy increase from the 2018-19 school year to the preliminary budget for 2019-20. So with the additions I was just talking about, our 2019-20 preliminary budget is now $98.7 million, which is a $3.6 million increase, or 3.83%. I will say that just over $1 million of that increase is a one-time expense, and we're requesting that we could use fund balance to fund that. So our tax levy is $61.9 million, which is a 2.9% increase, or $1.7 million. That is tax cap compliant. We're requesting that we can levy at the maximum. So this slide just shows the detail of our expenditures budget. It's the categories that we review every time we do a presentation. Again, as I stated just now, our budget to budget increase is $3.6 million, or 3.83%. The total budget that we're requesting is $98.7 million. The two areas where the changes are from the last presentation are in equipment and in the transfer to other funds. I do have some slides later in the presentation where I'll get into the detail for that. But in equipment, we added $240,000 from the last presentation and $1,015,000 to the transfer to other funds. So with all the budgets, the revenues must always match the expenditures. So here you'll see too that the preliminary revenue budget is $98.7 million with a 3.83% or $3.6 million increase. Our most significant, or the revenue source that we derive most of our income from, is the tax levy. As I also stated, we're at the tax cap of 2.9%, or $1.7 million, so we are tax cap compliant. Our second largest source of income is state aid. This is really the one area of the budget that's still unknown. I was just checking the website before I came up here to see if there's any news, but the state's fiscal year ends this weekend. Their new fiscal year starts on Monday. We're hoping that they'll have a budget passed then. If there is any changes to state aid, we'll make those changes. If there are changes, hopefully we would have a little bit of an increase. We would increase the state aid amount, but we wouldn't ask more in the overall budget. We would just ask to use less fund balance. Because that fund balance appropriation line, that's where we fill in the gap between our revenues and our expenses.
Linda, before you move on.
Sure.
Poughkeepsie Journal ran an article recently on the state aid proposed by Governor Cuomo, and it showed an increase for Hyde Park.
Yeah, we have an increase in our foundation aid. At the last presentation, I had the detail of our state aid. We're getting a slight increase, about 1.4% in foundation aid, but most of the other aids are based on enrollment. So because we've had declining enrollment, we can expect to see decreases in those other aids. And we also had in 2018-19, we got a little bit more aid for special education students than we normally would, because in the spring last year, we had a few students move into the district. And we don't see that, we get the aid for that in the following year. We haven't experienced that this year, so I didn't change the number of what we could expect for the private access or public access cost aid. Now, as always, we're required to report the budget in its three components: program, administrative, and capital. The program costs include regular and special education, co-curricular activities, athletics, and transportation. The administrative costs include central administration, finance, legal, the Human Resources Office, and the Board of Education expenses, which is typically the meeting expenses. Yeah. I'm looking at Perry because he had a question about that last time. The capital is our facilities and facilities operations and maintenance, any capital outlay projects that we would have, so those are cash capital projects, and also the debt service payments that we make. The BOCES capital project is actually an administrative cost for us. We're paying $392,400 for the BOCES capital project, but that has to be included in our admin cost, not our capital cost. We're still under that 10% threshold that we try to keep ourselves to, even by adding that BOCES project. But I know that in the next 2 years, in 2020, 21, and 21, 22, we'll probably be over the 10% because of the payments that we have to make for the BOCES capital project. All right, so this slide is one that shows one of the increases from the last budget presentation. These are our capital outlay projects. These are capital projects for which we would use cash to pay for the project. So the first one is a $100,000 project to do the lobby bathrooms, the men's bathrooms at FDR. So the first project, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. Yeah. So we're allowed to have one project every year up to $100,000 in cash, and we receive the entire amount of aid the year after the project finishes. So right now, our aid ratio is 64.7%, so we would get $64,700 back for that project if we spend the full $100,000 in the year that it's completed. We're on a 4-year plan. So if this budget is approved, that's what we consider our first year. Our second year, which would be 1920, would be actually planning the project and seeking SED approval and even going out to bid. And then our third year would be the year that we would do the work, hopefully over the summer. Mr. Sheldon says that's the best for him. And then the fourth year is the year in which we would receive the aid. So the other cash project that we're asking for is a technology project at FDR. This is one of the increases in the transfer to other funds that I talked about at the very beginning. So in total, the project cost is estimated at $1,015,512. Now, this is a number that our architects helped us come up with. We're expecting that when we have the HVAC work for the large capital project that was approved last year, that will have the ceilings and perhaps even the walls open at one time where we could easily get this tech project done. So we're looking to have the technology network upgraded, which would include upgrades to the communications rooms, the cabling system, the fiber optic system, and even the paging and the clock system. So again, we would receive aid on this at the current aid ratio of 64.7, if that doesn't change. However, that aid would be received over 15 years. We wouldn't get all of that all at once. So in total, for the two projects, we could expect aid of $721,000 for a net cost of about $394,000. So would anybody like to ask any questions on these two projects before we move on? Okay, thank you. Okay, and here is the other addition to the budget. It's for a security project for door hardening. What I mean by door hardening is making the doors actually more secure. We'd either get new doors that are safer and could help the staff and the students be more secure if they needed that. We're looking to either replace doors or in some cases just replace the door locks. On many of our old doors, the lock for the door is in the hallway on the outside and the key is required to lock the door. If we just replace the locks, I think we're looking to get the push locks so the doors can be locked from the inside. We could also replace the side light frames to make them more secure with either security or tinted films. So under the New York State SAFE Act, we're allowed to, we will get aid up to a maximum cost of $1,000 per interior door or $50,000 for exterior doors, or $5,000, I'm sorry, $5,000 for exterior doors. we're not really sure if the cost for the projects that we would do would stay under 1,000 for every door or under 5,000 for every exterior door. I think that so far from a door vendor that we've been using, it seems like we can stay under those numbers. So if we are under those numbers for everything that we spend, we would get back 64.7% in aid. Now, that's the same as our building aid ratio. So for this project, we would have to upfront the money, $240,000, and then in the very next year, we could get back the aid of $155,000. So in total, the cost would be $84,700. Now, this project would not complete the entire district. When we did a preliminary estimate, we thought this would cover our elementary schools, but we got a more detailed estimate, and this doesn't quite cover it. So with the help of Aviva, we're going to pick out which areas should be looked at first for next year.
And I'll just add with the whole SAVE committee.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And
They'll be rejoicing if this got passed.
And then we may ask for more funding in future years' budget so that we could do the rest of the district too. Are there any questions about this project? No? Okay, thank you. All right. So the next three slides show the additions and the savings in the budget. What I mean by that is anything that's a new program or a new hire, we add as a budgetary addition. We're not talking about the increase in a cost for a program that we already have. This is just something totally new. And by savings, we mean if we actually remove a program or staffing from the budget, we look at what the savings are. So for 2019-20, we're looking to add a 0.4 full-time equivalent technology integrator. At the last presentation, I said we were hiring a full-time person, but we actually pay for 0.6 full-time equivalent through BOCES. And we want to be able to have one full-time person or one full-time position. So the cost for that would be $30,139. At the middle school, we want to add a full-time security monitor. The cost would be offset by eliminating two school monitor positions. The total cost with that offset is $31,342. We want to hire a digital media coordinator for the district office. That would be a stipend position, $3,675. We do want to change the heating and ventilation technician to a heating and ventilation mechanic. It's a small upgrade, it's a promotion for that person. It would be $3,265. Add a wrestling coach for $4,098, and add a maker STEAM club advisor at the middle school for $3,336. There's a second page of additions. So here's the tech project that we talked about under capital of $1,015,512. The $100,000 capital outlay project to do the lobby men's bathroom at FDR, $100,000. And the security project for the interior and exterior door hardening, $240,000. So for savings, we have 10 teachers that are retiring. We're looking to reduce the teaching staff by 3.5 full-time equivalents. Some of those reductions will come from the attrition from the teachers retiring, but not all, and I'll have more detail about that at a later budget presentation. But the total savings from that is $847,962. We're reducing some of the professional services that we pay for through BOCES to save $60,000. We're moving our trauma-informed services to a federal grant, so we'll save $40,000 in the budget. So overall, when we net the additions to the savings, we're increasing the budget by $483,405. Now, just remember that $1,015,000 project is a one-time expense.
That federal grant is a new grant?
I think so.
Yeah, it's new. We just got it new this past summer, Title IV. And I had put that contract there, but because we found out about it so late, it was in the general fund. So we ended up using the general fund for other conferences and related work, but we don't need to do that going forward. So we're just going to keep it in the Title IV grant, and then that frees up.
Are there other questions about the additions and the savings? Okay. All right. So at the last presentation, I did show you the calculation for the tax cap. Our tax cap is 2.9% increase. I know a lot of people do refer to the tax cap as a 2% cap, but there's only a part of the tax cap calculation that's limited to 2%. So if, in all of the assumptions in the budget are assuming that the levy will be set at the maximum amount, however, the board does have the option to set the levy at any amount up to the 2.9%. So I just wanted to show you what it would look like for the fund balance if we did levy below the maximum amount that's allowed. So in this scenario, I just assume that I just wanted to compare the 2.9% to anything lower, so I chose 2% because in the past, when we looked at this, at the fund balance and tax cap, we always used 2% as the other option that we would look at. So right now, in the budget, we have the 2.9% increase, which is $61.9 million tax levy. If the tax levy was set at just 2%, it would be $61.3 million, which is a $543,000 difference. Now, assuming that the total budget stays the same at the $98.7 million, in order to make up that difference of the $543,000, we would have to appropriate more to the tax levy. So that's the first row that's highlighted. You can see that we would increase the amount to appropriate by $543,000. And that would mean that at the end of the school year, after all of the appropriations to next school year, we would have $543,000 less in fund balance. So as it is right now, with the 2.9% increase, I'm projecting that our unassigned fund balance, which is the portion that's limited to 4% of the next year's budget, would be 2.71%. If we appropriate more so that we could lower the tax levy, we would have 2.15% left in unassigned fund balance at the end of the year.
Can I just make one comment?
Mm-hmm.
Because any district that doesn't appropriate the calculated amount is doing a disservice to the children in the district, because you lose that amount forever.
Yeah.
It's not just 1 year. It means the basis, it changes down, and so I would like to call it a death spiral. If you kept doing that, eventually you couldn't afford to have your kids in the school.
Yeah, I have the next two slides. I show the history of our tax cap and what we actually levied at, and then I also have a projection going into the future.
Okay.
Show that.
I would also say that the strategy of using those funds for one-time events is a great one, because it gets a lot of the, those are all great projects that we want to get done, and it's the only way they're going to get funded. And the other benefit is that if something changes in the next year, you haven't committed those to a program that all of a sudden you've got to make a decision of, do I cut this program in order to maintain something else?
I agree with
You've got greater flexibility, so I'm glad to see that. I think this is a good solid budget with doing a lot of great things.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So there are, well, I'll show you the next slide, because I think we can get into more conversation with this. So this is the history of our tax cap. The first year that the tax cap was in effect was for the 2012-13 school year. And you can see, if you look at the second to last column, which is labeled differences, or difference, that is the difference between what we could have levied and what we actually did levy in those 2 years. Now, I don't remember the reason why. I was in the district, but not in my current position, but I'm assuming that the decision was made to levy at an amount lower than the tax cap, because the maximum levy in those 2 years was nearly 4%. You can see in the first year, we could have levied up to 3.7%, and in the second year, we could have levied 3.99%, but in each of those years, we set a levy that was less than a 3% increase.
I
So
think,
that,
having been on the board then,
Yeah.
I think we didn't understand the ramifications of
Right.
not taking the full amount.
And I do remember when the tax cap first came about, we weren't sure how long it would stay in effect either.
There was only one number kicking around then, Doug, that was 2%.
2%,
Nobody
yeah.
know anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you can see that first year, we had a difference of $545,728. Well, every year since 2012-13, our maximum tax levy that we could
It's less by that much.
is $545,000 less than it would have been if we set the levy at the max that year. And then in the second year, it was $681,000. So every year after that, now we're $1.2 million. Every year, our maximum amount is that much less than it could be. Now, if you look at 2016-17, that was actually, the $2,000 was about an error in taxes. It was a small amount, but that was the year where the tax levy was only 0.21%. I don't know if you remember, that was the lowest it had been since the early 70s. Now, if we had known back in 12-13 and 13-14, we may not have set the levy where it was. And then in 2017-18, we actually looked at the budget and we set the levy below the maximum amount because we were trying to adjust the budget to get it to, so that we were budgeting every year for what we actually needed and not over budgeting. So that was a one-time thing. But in total, since the beginning of the tax cap, we've set the tax levy at $1.6 million less than we could have. Now, because we're also missing out on the amounts that we gave up then, but also the increases that would have occurred on that. So since that time, our tax levy in 1920, if we set it at the maximum, is still $1.8 million lower than it would have been if we had never set the tax levy lower than the maximum amount. So I have another slide about a projection in 10 years. So do we want to talk about this slide, or shall I move on? Yeah. Okay.
So back on that.
Yeah, sorry.
What message are you trying to convey with this?
I'm just providing the information to the board, because the board needs to agree to where we set the tax levy.
No, I know that, but so when I see it could have been 1.8, is that good or is that bad?
It depends on how you look at it. So one of the issues that's up for debate with the state budget is whether or not the tax cap would become permanent. So if it becomes permanent, then from now until the end of time, we will always miss out. We will always have that much less that we can levy up to. And in a year where the tax cap is higher and things are good, that might not be so bad. But if we get into a recession again, because our tax cap is tied to the consumer price index, if we get to a place like that again, where our tax levy is close to zero, or sometimes negative. There are school districts that experience negative tax caps every year, like a negative increase, or really a decrease from the year before, then it's just that much money that we don't have to rely on.
I think the other thing that's worth noting is that the maximum of 2% is set based on the consumer price index. And so in recent history, it's been fairly stable. It's been below 2. I mean, it's gone quite a ways below 2 at times, but there have been times when it goes above 2. But it doesn't matter. We still get just 2%. There's no ability to go over that. So I look at this and say it's lost opportunity, because, and I'm not saying we should just tax as much as we possibly can, but we're limited as to how much tax revenue and what increases we can get year after year. So the point is, when we have an opportunity that again, the system is set up so that we can increase the tax and we don't take advantage of that, we pay for it it's a compounding issue year after year after year. So I see that as lost opportunity. And I'm all for whatever tax money we've got to make sure we're spending it right. And like I commend the projects that we're working on, because we've got to take care of our infrastructure. But it's difficult to make the decision to spend money when you're working within that 2% tax cap or less. So the message that I'm getting is, I think we need to consider strongly that each year we need to take the maximum that we can get, because there'll be years we won't get as much as we need. And nobody's going to come to our rescue when we need more than what the tax cap will allow us.
Are we allowed to go over the tax cap?
Yeah, you can.
If we can do a super majority.
Exactly.
If we can get a 60%, or 60% plus one, I think,
Yeah.
in order to do that. That's very difficult. It's not been successful throughout the state.
No. Usually when school districts, I don't know the exact percentage or the statistics, but most school districts that try to pierce the tax cap have to put out another budget because it fails. Because they need they need more than 60% approval.
Well, doesn't that also cost you down the road? If you
Yes.
exceed it one year, then the next year you're...
If you have the approval, it doesn't cost you down the road. But if we were to go over, if we were to get audited and were to show that the calculation was wrong and our actual levy was more than our tax cap, then we would have to give that back in a future year or spread out over a few years.
But the other issue is, if we exceed the tax, if we through voter approval exceed the tax cap, I believe that we also lose, is it the STAR exemption?
Not the STAR exemption, there's been
Yeah, there's a rebate.
there's been the rebates that are tied to the tax cap, and the taxpayers only get that rebate if the school district is tax cap compliant, or under the tax cap. Even if the voters approved 60% or more, they wouldn't get that refund.
So the point is, take it when we can get it, because it helps to build. We have good money that we can work with, get projects done, knowing that there's going to be years that it's going to be leaner. We might like to then, exceed the tax cap, but by being able to stay within the tax cap, we keep those refunds available to our tax base as well.
And one thing I worry about, I know I say this a lot, I worry about the health insurance rates. They're increasing faster than the tax cap is. Even this year, which is a relatively low year for the Dutchess Educational Health Insurance Consortium, it's nearly 7% increase. And everything else, our salaries are less than 2% increase. So at one point, that's just going to make the health insurance that much larger of the entire budget. So,
We're a very people-heavy industry, and all of those costs
and we should
escalate greater. I mean, just by the nature of the business, but the point is that they're all of those are escalating at greater than 2%.
And also, we've been losing enrollment, so every year since I've been the business official, we've cut back on teaching staff every year. There may come a point, I hope there comes a point, where enrollment levels out and we don't have to cut teaching staff anymore, but then that's that much more that we need for each budget-to-budget increase. You can see it was $850,000 nearly is what we're saving in next year's budget just from that. Well, that includes retirees too, which we'll always have, but eventually we'll get to a point where we're not cutting staff, and there is no mechanism in the tax cap that accounts for changes in enrollment. So, okay, so I have another slide about the tax cap. This was just a projection I did 10 years into the future. Assuming that we levy at the 2.9% max this year, assuming that if we levied at 2% this year, even though the max is 2.9, you can see in that last column in the first year, that's that $543,000 difference. But by 2028-29, our levy would be $649,000 lower than if we levy at 2.9% this year. But every year, that's how much we're seeing in in changes. This year it's 543,000. The effect of that 543,000 next year, assuming there's a 2% increase, is 554,000, and so on. And so it's every year. And this would actually be compounded against what we've already given up in the tax cap.
So that's over $6 million.
Yes. Yep. Yep. So, are we ready to move on? Yep. Okay. All right. So, Proposition 2, this is what George presented on when he was before the board at the last meeting. It's our school bus replacement plan. In total, we're asking to replace 9 buses with 9 new buses, and also to buy the snow scraper. And as I understand it, George showed you a nice picture of what the snow scraper is, where the buses drive right under it to take the snow off. That's not aidable, but it is a safety issue, and the cost is $31,780. So we wanted to roll that up into the borrowing that we would do for the buses. So in total, with the 9 new buses and the snow scraper, the cost is $753,540. We get aid, or transportation aid ratio is 60.1%. We only get aid on the buses, so in total, the aid would be $433,778. Now, we pay for the buses over 5 years, and we get the aid over 5 years. So the total cost of the buses and the snow scraper after the state aid is $319,762. Okay, so this is actually my second to last slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the New York State transparency requirements. This doesn't affect the budget at all, other than the fact that we had to add account codes. So it changed our chart of accounts, and we're actually still changing it. We've added 280 codes, and we only had 320 to begin with. So I was wondering why I was so busy with this. I couldn't understand why I was so wrapped up in it until I looked at the actual numbers, that we had to add that many account codes. So the New York State transparency requirement is actually tied to the federal ESSA requirements, but for New York State, we're required to report our budget at a school building level. So most of our expenses for like payroll, we had one account code for teachers that taught K through 3, because that's how we're required by New York State to report it. But now we have to have a K through 3 teaching code for every elementary school building. And then we also have, the next level is grades 4 through 6. So we need 5 of those codes, because we need that for the middle school too. And then the next level is 7 through 12. Which will have 2 of those account codes. And then each of the building already had their own account codes for supplies, and they're contractual, but the instructional office, like the directors, would have one code for textbooks for social studies, and one for math, and one math supplies code. Now they each have 6 codes for each area, for each of their buildings. And they've been really helpful in helping me determine how much the budget should be for each building, but I'm sure that we're not 100% accurate, so I predict that the board will see a lot of budget transfer requests next year, and hopefully over the next few years we can get it straightened out. But we're required to report the budget to the New York State Budget Office by the end of August. It's not a state education reporting requirement. And then the other piece to that is the federal ESSA requirement, which is Every Student Succeeds Act. For ESSA, we're required to report at a building level 2. Only ESSA is interested in how we actually spend the funds. So the New York State requirement is how we budget by building, and ESSA is how we spend the money by building. And our first report for that will be due in December, based on the 18-19 school year. So for us in the business office, that'll be the hardest year to complete, because currently we don't have the building level detail for 18-19. So we'll have to work with the various buildings and departments to figure out how the money was actually spent in each of their codes. So And the board will see a difference in the treasurer's reports that you get from your treasurer. They'll be much longer. Right now, just the general fund appropriation status, which is the expenses, is about 13 or 14 pages long. I'm assuming if we added almost twice as many account codes, that report will be almost twice as long. Okay. All right, so I don't have anything else. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'd just like to say I have one more budget presentation before we ask the board to adopt the budget. I don't foresee any changes unless the state changes the state aid amounts, which I would change that and actually lower what we were asking for the fund balance appropriation. But that next presentation is April 11th, and then on April 23rd, which is a Tuesday, will be the final budget presentation. It'll be the night that the board adopts the budget, and it's also the night that the board will vote on the BOCES budget. And then our budget hearing is May 9th, and the school budget vote is May 21st. It's all day at Haviland Middle School. So.
Any questions? Okay, thanks,
All right,
Linda.
thank you.
Great job, Linda.
Thank you.
Good job, yes.
A lot of information.
So at this time, we'll have public participation. Can I have a motion to open public participation?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. At this time, if you would like to address the board, please go to the microphone, state your name, and,
Cynthia Rumble.
okay?
I have 3 minutes. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah.
I'll time myself. I'll spend 1 minute on myself, 1 minute on FDR, and 1 minute on my son. My name is Cynthia Rumble. I went to W.W. Smith School for elementary school. I went to Poughkeepsie Middle School for junior high, and I graduated from Poughkeepsie High School in 1982, went to Emerson College, did not leave on bad terms, but did not graduate, took 1 course at Vassar College, went to New Paltz, and it took me from 1982 to 1995 to receive an associate's degree in liberal arts humanities. And I really wish my parents could be here, but I'm not going to brag about them. But my mother was a fundraiser, and my father gave 55 years to Vassar College, Professor Emeritus. So that's important to me because they're proud of me because they're both deceased, and they know that I'm here, and this means a lot to my family and my son. Now that FDR, I apologize for being late. I'm having a lot of issues with my son. I'm not sure exactly if I'm talking about the appropriate things for this, since this is my first time doing this, so I'm asking you to have mercy if I'm doing anything wrong, and any kind of comments or corrections you can privately tell me later. My son is on PINS diversion. And the reason why I was late was because our communication is something we need to work on, and he did not call me with his cell phone to let me know where he was, and we had a probation meeting today that I thought I was excused from with Officer Cruz, and basically I called because the father of my son, Josh Rumble, who I need to get a restraining order from, and I have suffered from DV and can no longer speak to him. I asked Officer Cruz to call him, the father, to tell him that the meeting was going to be canceled, but Officer Cruz, being a probation officer, had the right to say it's not canceled, but I needed to cancel it so we could have both parents there, and the father was a working father. My point being that my missing the probational meeting was justified because I called the worker and I left a message with Officer Cruz, and that was why I was late. And basically, I'd also just like to say that I appreciate the programs that you have at FDR, and I hope that the concession stand will really have healthy choices for food, because I noticed, I was there today, and I noticed a lot of the kids were eating Doritos and stuff, and I'm also very concerned, my major concern about FDR and children are these video games. I found out from Dr. Gearing at Children's Medical that they can cause brain damage, and I also found out from Dr. Gearing at Children's Medical that from the ages, which is a clinical scientific fact, that teenage boys who smoke marijuana from 15 to 23, there have been registered cases that it can cause schizophrenia. And so basically, I'd really like to give a lot of congratulations to Rebecca Moore. And I know that Mr. Sullivan did have his baby about maybe this morning after our conference, so Mr. Sullivan has a new baby girl. And basically, Mr. Ruella has helped me a lot, and I was out of the home for a while. I will wrap this up in a minute or 2 minutes, or 1 minute. In wrapping this up, I'd like to say that I'm very concerned about my son because I do not want him to be taken away from me, and I'm hoping to speak to Greer, Rycheck, or some kind of anybody from the board, one person maybe as a mentor for me to help me make good decisions so that my son can graduate FDR. But there also is the other decision, should he be sent to another school and should we move for 11th and 12th grade? And in closing, I will say thank you for the Christmas shoes that were given to him when I was in a psych hospital for mental illness. And my son has a lot of issues, and I'm concerned about this budget and just how, I know I'm late, I apologize, I know I don't know really much, this is my first Board of Education meeting, but $100,000 on a men's bathroom, is that correct? Was that a correct statement?
Yes.
I find that preposterous, because there are people in crack houses in the city of Poughkeepsie. Poughkeepsie High School they would never, ever do that. And, I'm not complaining or making a comment. I know this is my first time, because the last thing I'd like to say is Mr. Sullivan is really an amazing person. And I find that the Board of Education is much more effective than the PTA. No arguments, but I tried the PTA and I didn't feel I was heard. So thank you for listening, and I really want my son to graduate high school and college. And I don't think the NBA's, and he didn't get in the team. He tried out for JV basketball, and they don't even offer him the water boy or anything, so it's like, you didn't make it. I find that FDR is very, if you're smart, you're good, you got money, you get attention. And if you have all these issues, you get somewhat neglected. And I think I can write a letter to Greer and follow up. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate all of you. And this is my first time, so please have compassion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is anybody else would like to address the board?
Wayne Federico. I taught school for 38 years. I have a concern. My grandson goes to Ralph Smith. He's in kindergarten. And the teacher is leaving. And the best way to keep information away from parents and grandparents is to tell people not to speak about it. And that, as soon as you tell them that, that's when you get all the information. Through grapevine, through rumor, I heard that the teacher has been bruised, physically bruised, and nothing's been done about it. Now, if this is the case, I'm very upset, because my grandson loves the teacher. And the principal doesn't want to speak about it. The union, I don't know where they are. I would just like to have somebody out there get to the bottom of this and find out what the real story is, because if she has been hit by a student or anything like that, something's terribly wrong in Ralph Smith. And I'm not happy about it, because I don't want anything happening to my grandson. If it's happening to a teacher, it certainly can happen to a child. And somebody's got to step up. If the principal's not going to do it, the union's not going to do it, somebody's got to do it. I hope it's not true, but all the signs point to it. Especially when the principal says, I can't talk about it. That means there's something out there. I appreciate you listening to me. I know you have a tough job, and I hate to be something like this, but thank you very much.
Is anybody else who would like to address the board?
Hi, guys. Bobby Goodman. Two things have been brought up to my attention on the proposition, just so if you could check before you accept the budget. The wrestling coach, the stipend that is listed is more than the stipend in the teacher contract. So that was asked why that would be added. And then the full-time security monitor at Haviland. So the two monitor positions will now become a full-time security monitor. Does that security monitor job become a civil service security monitor, or is that just like right now our monitors are just monitors, so just wondering if that's a civil service position that we're adding into our budget. And that's it. Thanks.
Is anyone else who would like to address the board? So at this time, public participation is now closed. Ms. Rumble, so though we cannot talk about stuff with pens and that, we do appreciate your concern about your child, and we'll look a little more into this, and I'll get back to you, okay? And Mr. Federico, I think we'll have someone investigate and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I can do some responding now.
Okay.
On tonight's board agenda is the kindergarten teacher's resignation. And we are looking to replace as soon as possible. And in fact, there's a transition tomorrow. And one of our retired kindergarten teachers, very recently retired, will be in there tomorrow, and we're hoping that she remains for the remainder of the school year. We anticipate that she will be on the next agenda. That's all we're allowed to publicly disclose. It is a situation that, we've been monitoring, and there is a resignation on the board agenda tonight.
Well, I prefer to have it, something done, not just monitored. It's been monitored since September. It is now March. Okay. You would think that from September to March, it wouldn't have been monitored, it would have been taken care of, point blank, done, ended.
Okay, we'll look into this, Mr. Federico. Linda, can you answer Bobby's question?
Yeah. Hi, Bobby. So the wrestling coach, and actually anything that was on the additions for salaries includes benefits. So it is the stipend plus payroll taxes and other benefits that are included in that. And I'm sorry, the security monitor. We do currently have 3 different security monitors that work in Hyde Park, mostly at the high school. I don't remember which level we're hiring at the middle school, but it is a position that we currently have in the union and through civil service. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And full-time.
Full-time.
And I think that it's, two thoughts. Cynthia, just, advocate for your son. That's what we all have to do as parents. That's our responsibility as parents, is advocate for your son, and don't stop doing that. You should always do that. As far as the bathroom, the $100,000 bathroom, this isn't,
I apologize.
no, that's right. No. I mean, you know what? It's taxpayers' right to question how money is being spent. And I agree, spending $100,000 sounds like a ridiculous amount of money. But it's not a bathroom like you have in your home. It's a bathroom that has multiple stalls. It's a multiple occupancy bathroom. And the other thing you have to realize is that when we do things in the school district, any construction that where we hire a contractor, because of state laws and the regulations that we work with, we pay a lot more to contractors than what you would to come in. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's just the way the structure is, and also the way that we build. I mean, when we build schools are institutions, and we build them, the bathrooms that we're taking out have probably been there since sometime in the 60s, I suspect. They're probably the original bathrooms. When we build so that it lasts a very long time. In a residential situation, most bathrooms are probably renovated, every 20, 25 years. This bathroom's probably gonna, will probably be there, it's a generation by the time it gets done again. So that's why the numbers may seem a little skewed, but that's just unfortunately the cost of doing business in the education world under the state regs that we work with. But, thank you.
Yes? Okay, on the board discussion. Before we do the subcommittee reports, I'd like for anyone encouraged who would like to run for the board, please stop by the district office and pick up an application and fill it out. We do have 3 positions on the board. Dan, did you want to?
Last week I had said, last meeting I had indicated I was undecided. Since that time, I've completed my thoughts on what's going on, had some conversations with my wife, and that position will be an open position. So I'll end my term this year, at the end of my 18th year, and I'll be sitting out with you guys next year.
18 years on the board? Wow.
Don't I look it?
No.
I'm only 28.
Yes.
So, been a rough 18 years.
Aging is quick. We didn't tell you about that, Carla. We don't like to give away all the secrets.
Patrick's got some great going on there, too.
I'd like to again just encourage everyone to run for the board. Consider joining us. It's not bad, not bad.
Hey.
But who knows, you might be able to do better.
You might. I wish somebody would do better. So it's good for the whole district to do better than we are.
It helps the district, it helps the board. I think there's a value in having good, qualified candidates to run for the board. I think that if you're sincere and you're honest about what you want to do, it's very rewarding. It certainly takes time, but it's very rewarding, and I encourage anyone to take a serious consideration for it. And they're not a bad group of people to work with.
Hey.
Even Doug? Okay.
Most of them.
Subcommittee reports?
We haven't met.
Nope.
Yeah, we haven't met.
Okay, so we can move on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Get it?
Take your pick.
Pick anybody.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to say that on the personnel agenda, we have Rick Morrison, and just to remind people that we had a moment of silence at our last board meeting for Rick's passing. So I didn't want people, if they didn't know we didn't have a moment of silence, to just think that we ignored it. So our deepest condolences continue to go out to Rick's family. And again, we had a moment of silence at our last board meeting.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Can I have a motion for 11.1, special education placements?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I've reviewed the packet and recommend its adoption as presented.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have a motion for 11.2, Proposition 1, estimated expenditures of the district for 2019-2020 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Can I have a motion for Proposition 2, the transportation plan?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Can I have a motion for Proposition 3, the student ex officio board member?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I think it's just important for people to realize that this is, we have to vote on this, I think it's every 3 years? 2 years? 2 years. 2 years, for the purposes of having a student board member, and I think that it's been a huge success here in the district, and,
Right.
you know, it's,
I'd like to say that even though I didn't think it was possible, the bar has been raised each year. Each year, they've been even better than the last, so thank you, Patrick.
All those in favor?
Mike seconded.
Perry was first, I was second.
Huh?
Yep.
Can I have a motion for 11.5? What?
Did you vote?
Yes, all in favor, we did. All
Sorry. Sorry.
gotta keep up.
I'm caught up, go ahead.
11.5, a resolution calling for the annual meeting of the district, legal notice for budget vote and board member election.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Have a motion for 11.6, printing of poll books.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Doug, for a second. Okay, 11.7, appoint election officials.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carries. Have a motion for 11.8, a secret for a resolution for FDR Roosevelt High School bathroom project.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, I do have a question on this, and I think that technically, because in an earlier, up in 11.2 proposition was the funding for this bathroom, correct? Is that right?
It's the
Yeah.
estimated. The board adopts the budget on
Next, okay, all right.
April 23rd.
All right,
but-
that's what works
Yeah, we
then.
have to have this resolution now so
Or we
that we
pass.
can
Okay.
post the legal ads.
Okay,
There's no figure in Prop 1.
okay, all right. I feel better now, because I knew that it had to be
Yeah.
done, secret had to be done
Right.
before the proposition is, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Nobody else.
Motion carries.
Secret is, but.
Can I have a motion for 11.9, the secret resolution for the FD Roosevelt High School Technology Infrastructure Project?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Or discussion first, but everybody, okay.
We already had that one.
Okay, 11.10, the overnight field trip, National Association for Music Education's All-Eastern Treble Choir.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Getting late.
Perry didn't have a question on the field trip. It's like, whoa.
I'm, never mind. I'm holding.
Okay, can I have a motion for second participation?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? If anybody else would like to address the board, please go to the microphone.
You can get up again. Yes, you can. Yeah.
Yep, you can go.
Yeah.
Cynthia, will pause 2 minutes. I would like to propose a mentorship program with honor students helping younger students who are struggling. I'm sure this has probably been brought up before. I just think it might help with students that are doing well, helping the students that are failing, because I think probably the goal of everybody at FGR is for all the students to graduate. Thank you for listening.
Anybody else would like to address the board? Seeing none, public participation is now closed. And yes, I do agree, mentoring programs are good, but I do believe we have some.
We have Sources of Strength, and we have some other programs. There's a few different variations of it, but right now, the one that comes to mind is Sources of Strength, which is a formal program.
And also, that could also be something that could be done through National Honor Society for hours for those students, because sometimes it's difficult if you're so busy. So just something else to think about.
Good point.
Yeah, good point.
That's why he's there. A fount of information.
Okay, there is no other matters deemed necessary by the board.
God.
Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries.